discussing a very, very, very good film. And I'm here with my co-host, Ty. How are you doing, Ty?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm trying my hardest to survive in this very quiet post-apocalyptic landscape.
Down by about 12 decibels.
How annoying do you think it would be to do this entire video just like this?
This far. They really, really like our podcast. And that's the only way to explain it. But yes, we are whispering because we are doing a fantastic film from 2018, A Quiet Place. And now I think we can use our normal voices.
I think so. I think it's worth the risk of
Yeah.
dying a
If you
horrible death.
guys, if you're able to hear that and make it through, you are a real one. There's only one way to explain that. You are a real one. Um, so we are breaking down A Quiet Place because, of course, A Quiet Place Day One just came out in theaters, and it's actually smashing at the box office right now. Like I think
Mhm.
it's already up to 100 million. I think it's already surpassed the budget. But besides that, we're looking at where it all started with John Krasinski's A Quiet Place. It's kind of nice that I mean, just kind of like speaking on the big box office picture. I feel like June and July has been a really big resurgence. Like the movies that came out in May didn't do so hot. But like, since March, Dune Part 2 like smashed everything. And then there was a pretty big lull, but it feels like June, everything is coming back. And it started with Bad Boys, really kicked things off. And then Inside Out 2 shot is the first movie this year to cross a billion. First
Mhm.
one since Barbie of last year. And now Quiet Place is looking very, very strong. Probably won't hit a billion, honestly, but it's still looking very, very strong, doing incredibly well at the box office. And I think it's a good sign for moviegoers. I guess the incredible heat wave throughout the country, um, it was 96 here yesterday. So like maybe people are like, let me just
I
go
need
to the
some kind of
movies.
shelter. I
Yeah, I
need to be in
mean,
a dark, cold room for an hour and a half.
yeah, I guess May everyone was at the beach, and now in June it's like it is too hot to be at no beach right now.
Dude,
I'm going to movies.
literally, I went to the beach last week and it was so like offensively bright that I couldn't keep my eyes open.
Oh my
Like
God.
between like the reflection of the ocean and the sand itself, even with sunglasses, I was crying the
Oh
whole
my
time
God.
because I could not control how painful it was to look out
Jesus.
side. It's too hot.
It's
It's
too
too
hot.
hot. It's too
It's too
hot.
hot. Yeah. Yeah, and we're in Charlotte and North Carolina it gets pretty hot, but it's been like 96 for this past week. And like we have our convention in Salisbury. And I'm so glad I'm not doing parking because I would not have volunteered for it because it is too hot.
Mhm.
Too hot.
Way too.
So anyway, let's delve into where it all began with A Quiet Place. Of course, this movie came out in 2018. Oh yeah, and I just double checked. So yeah, day one has already passed 100 million, and its budget was only 67. So it's already well on its way to turning in a nice profit.
Let's
Um,
go.
so A Quiet Place came out in 2018. It was directed by John Krasinski, and starred him and his wife, Emily Blunt.
Mhm.
Um, and it was kind of described as like a post-apocalyptic horror movie. And I think we're gonna do an episode on this one, the next one, and then a day one when we get to see it. And so I think this one, it kind of it feels I think this movie, like the number one thing I can say about it is that it has kind of expanded like the genre of horror for me because
Mhm.
like for me horror is a huge turnoff. Like as soon as something is like it's horror, I don't like being jumped, I don't like being scared, I don't like demons, I don't like any of that. So like as soon as something gets marketed as like a horror film, I'm like, "Oh, yep, that's a movie I will not be watching." And I just
Mhm.
instantly tune out. Um and so that's why I didn't see this movie for a long time. And even like in my class we studied Like when I was studying cinematography and sound design, we studied how they did the sound design on A Quiet Place. Like it became that like students in film schools use this movie as like a blueprint to study. Like how did they come up with the sounds of the creatures? And like some of it was like a combination of like crab legs and cracking lettuce. There's a really cool video on YouTube that if you see it, if you get a chance to check it out. But this movie has become so iconic since then, and I'm so glad that like I just ended up just like, you know what, let me just see it because
Mhm.
it is fantastic. And I feel like it definitely, while it has horror elements in it, um, like again, I might not know enough about horror to describe it as like a fully fledged horror movie, but it felt like a survival disaster kind of movie. Like it felt very similar to like suspense thrillers like Jurassic Park, I Am Legend, movies like that. But it still had like the jump scare elements of horror. It just didn't have like typically again, when I think of horror, I just immediately go to the stereotype of like hacking someone with a chainsaw, Halloween, Saw, Texas Massacre. Like it's not horror unless someone's screaming and blood and stuff is going everywhere. And that's just not really like appealing to me. So like
Mhm.
it kind of reminds me of like, a lot of people, like there's a lot of people I grew up with that kind of think that like rap is all just like one thing. And it's like they're all just talking about like money and cars and women, and that's all the rap can ever talk about. And it's like there's actually a lot of other subgenres of rap that discuss a lot of different things. And I feel like this movie is that for the horror genre for me. Like it's a very suspenseful, and it is still a horror film, don't get me wrong. Like it is a horror film, but it feels like it kind of fits into like almost like a subgenre of its own category. And just shows that not all horror is the same.
Yeah, like everything else, horror exists on a spectrum. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't have horror doesn't mean gore. Horror is just movies that are intended to scare you. And this movie feels like at its core, it's trying to scare you among other feelings. Because you could also there's strong family dynamics in
Oh
this
yeah.
movie. There's emotional turns towards the end with John Krasinski's big moment towards the end of the film. Like it feels very much like a family movie and not so much about the horror of it. It's some might even say it's a more of a thriller than horror at times.
Hmm.
The way it's presented, but at its core, I think it feels like it's trying to scare you to me. And I think it does that so effectively with like the main gimmick of this movie
Which you already
being
experienced if you made it this far. So yeah.
yeah. So Will, you didn't see this movie in theaters when it came out, right?
No.
So I will say that is something. This is one of those movies that like if it ever, I'm sure it will eventually be like re-released in
Experience to
like a
go have.
local theater. It's definitely worth that experience because I watched it originally when it came out and then just last night at home in preparation for here, and it is definitely a different experience.
Yeah.
Like when you are in an environment that is pitch black and
Hmm.
has really good sound, and then you choose not to have much sound out, it increases the tension so much more than just say watching it at home.
Yeah,
Not that
I
you
was
can't
watching
enjoy it,
it.
but
Yeah, no, I was watching it on my couch with, I mean, it was during the daytime, so like, lights were streaming in, like, it didn't create the same atmosphere as the theater, but it let me know, because like the worst thing I'm afraid of is being scared so bad that I'm like jump and like throw something everywhere, but I'm like,
mm,
based upon these two movies, I can handle a day one in theaters. I can handle Quiet Place day one in theaters. So I'm very excited to see that, and hopefully it'll create a similar effect as A Quiet Place.
yeah. And I think this movie, we'll talk more about the series later, but the special sauce of this movie feels like the total commitment to the I don't want to say gimmick because that feels too reductive, but the idea of using sound so limited
Hmm.
and playing with how we like how important sound is to the movie going experience. Because I think this movie definitely came out in a period where I was starting to look a little more critically at movies, after high school, like how I was thinking about movies. This movie is like something that played around with the idea of how important it is, like how important sound is to the experience of a
Hmm.
film, and how much you can still do when you take it away, but then how impactful you can make these highs be when you bring it back in with force.
And
And
I didn't
it's
even
really
realize
cool.
that. Yeah, yeah, and I didn't even realize that so you saw this right after high school because it came
Yeah.
out in 2018. We graduated in 2016. Did you
Mm-hmm.
see it with anybody? Did you just go see it by yourself?
uh I don't remember the group I was with.
Who were you with? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just remember I was like, that was back when, I was in Florida and we were still hanging out. So I was like, I don't even remember you telling me that you were gonna go see it. And I was like, it's probably because I hated horror so much
You hated
that it
scary
was
things
like
so
there's
much.
no
Yeah.
reason to invite Will to this because he will not enjoy it. Which was fair, which was fair.
um no, it's a very, but I think this movie, it knows it knows exactly what it is. Like it feels like it's
Hmm.
really built around the premise, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. It feels really like it's an hour and a half. It's a tight 90 minutes, which is exactly how long this movie should have been. Like it didn't need to be any bit longer. Rewatching it again, I forgot how like quickly they moved through everything. Like in my head and in memories, I felt like it was slower paced, but this is rather like quick. We're gonna get to the points, we're gonna get to the ending,
Hmm.
and we're already done. And it feels like they mostly just wanted to play around with this idea while still having like a good like a central, I don't know. I the central like idea of hope, of finding hope, finding forgiveness and family, finding love. In some ways, it almost feels like a coming of age movie,
It I
from
feel
the
like this
daughter's perspective.
Yeah, I feel like the second one really leans into that coming of age. And like it's kind of hard to talk about both of them in the same breath, but like you just mentioned, that coming of age, I feel like the second one reminded me a lot of Stranger Things, which
Hmm.
I've only seen like clips of because my wife watched it. But it reminded me a lot of that. And so like I see what like all those elements that it has, like some of them it kind of builds on in the second one, but the first one kind of lays everything out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I saw it like the first because I watched this movie probably like a week ago or so, and like I
Hmm.
remember the first scene where the kid picks up the toy that makes noise, and their daughter, who's deaf, gives it back to him. And I remember when they were walking down the path, and the kid is playing with that toy, but it makes noise,
Hmm.
and the deaf girl doesn't realize, like obviously she can't hear it, and he's behind him. And again, major spoiler alert if you haven't seen this movie yet. It's really hard to talk about it without doing spoilers, so please go watch it. Like if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Like just do it. Do it. Um and I remember seeing John Krasinski turn around and run towards his son,
Hmm.
and then that creature came out of nowhere and grabbed the kid. And I feel like that was the first moment where I was like, this movie is different. It is not afraid, because like it's very hard to depict something that horrible happening to a child, and it's like this is the world that we live in. These creatures do not distinguish between man, woman, and child. If it makes noise, it's going to be eaten. And so and I feel like I really like that tension throughout the entire movie because the girl feels like the dad blames her for it, and I feel like and he doesn't, like he's like, and like the way that he professes his love for her at the end is really powerful as well. Like you said, it's a story that involves a lot of love and a lot of family. um and because I think it took him until the end of the movie to realize he wasn't holding it against her. I think it was just the entire world, the entire way they've had to live their lives was making him it was affecting him in a way that like he couldn't be the same loving father he used to be. He felt like he had to be tougher and more strict and more and not as compassionate as he wanted to because you're in a world with creatures that are literally hunting you based upon the sounds you make. So it's kind of hard, like and that's why again it's so hard to talk about the second one because I loved the second one so much because you got to see that contrast. Um, but this one was still fantastic in that regard. And I wasn't expecting, like, even though this movie came out 4 years, no, 6 years ago, um, I was surprised by the fact that John Krasinski, the father, gave his life to protect his kids. I didn't see that coming. When he let out that scream to attract the creature to get it away from them, like
Mhm.
I did not see that coming at all. I was like, did that just really happen? I was completely surprised and taken aback by it. And I think it was an extremely powerful moment. I mean, all of the acting in this movie is absolutely top notch. I think in this one, I kind of have to give the crown to Emily Blunt. Like, if we're just, and again, these are like we're talking her performance, like surpasses in A plus 100%. And John Krasinski's is right up there. But I think, the way she depicted trying to give birth silently
Mhm.
and the agony that she felt when she stepped on a nail, like
Mhm.
that's otherworldly. That was a whole nother level of, and I know this movie won a lot of awards, but like if it was up to me this year, she would have won for best actress, I feel like. And I'm not a huge Emily Blunt fan, um, but I think this is one of her best performances. Above Oppenheimer, above almost anything else she's been in. I think this is one of her top performances.
Yeah, I think everyone felt very, it felt like everyone was very limited in their capacity. Like this felt, I imagine, was a challenging role to take on.
Hmm.
And you're right, Emily Blunt absolutely killed it between the multiple moments of her having to hold back a stifled scream and to hold on to it, that itself was terrifying. Even like remove the monsters from the equation, remove the threat of death, just the idea
The threat of death, yes.
of trying to like hold yourself back while giving birth just feels like the most impossible thing that I can't even wrap my head around how difficult that would be. And she makes it so convincing that it's possible, but also torturous.
Oh
And
yeah.
she does it all with just her face, like primarily her
Hmm.
face. And so it's, she did an incredible job. Millicent Simmons, who played Reagan, she was
Phenomenal.
excellent. I don't think there was a bad performance here.
No.
Um,
Mm-mm.
at all. I think I think yeah, I look at the performances here and I just think of how challenging it had to have been to be so limited of how used to you are using your voice
Oh
to
yeah.
convey and to have to convey everything through either ASL or through just pure body language.
I mean,
Like
imagine not being able to podcast anymore. Like, what would we do with ourselves?
a torture.
I can't even imagine. Oh,
I think too, I'm impressed by how this world is built up in the film.
mhm.
Like the in in the movie itself, they have to be quiet, but they chose to immerse us in that by not explaining things. There's no explanation of how we got here. We're kind of just thrown into it and left to pick up the pieces of how the world operates from more subtle like world building events. And
Mhm.
I like that. I like the very minimal approach that this movie had, and I think it lends itself really well to the premise.
I think so too. And like I said, I've talked a lot about how much I like the second one, which I know for a lot of people, it wasn't like a letdown, but they feel like the first one is the best one. And they feel like the second one just wasn't quite as good. And to me, I'm kind of the opposite. I feel like the second one absolutely smashed it and I loved it. But I know if they chose to make the same decisions that they did in the second one, in the first one, it would have lessened the impact for me of the second one. You're right. By choosing to go minimalist, by choosing not to explain or even show how this world got started, like they did in the second one, by choosing
Mhm.
to wait, they created a lot more tension and a lot more suspense in the movie. Till by the time we got to the end, now we're wondering, how did this even like? What was this like when it first started? Like, what
Mhm.
was this? And it's like, well, you got to come see the sequel to find out.
Mhm.
And so that's exactly what you end up doing because you're so invested in this world and this family and how it happened. So
And it's something that I'm not sure is a positive or a negative, but it's that to the extreme. Like this movie is so reliant on the idea of it playing with sound that I don't think there's really much left if you took that away. Like if you took this movie and you tried to shoot it like any other movie, like I feel like what's here is not really that compelling. Like the family dynamic, the family
family.
dynamic on its own is not so compelling that it would I think it would be worth this movie as a whole. But that idea mixed with the family dynamic is what makes this movie special with those horror elements and how everything kind of feeds together. You know, the premise
Hmm.
itself being in a world so silent, it's, it almost feels metaphorical. It's so hard in a time of tragedy like that to tell, your daughter that you forgive her when your feelings are mixed, not blaming Reagan for the death, but still feeling absolutely gutted and torn by the reality of what happened. The loss
Exactly.
of your child because because they just wanted to be a kid. How could you blame anyone for wanting to have hope and joy and happiness in a world that's so oppressively against it? And how do you find that kind of compassion and forgiveness? The words aren't there, and I think that metaphorically works in a world where it's so like you cannot speak. Like you have to be so careful with your words, and I think that's the secret sauce that makes A Quiet Place stand out. That if you took that premise away and you just had the dynamic, I just don't think it would work very well. And I think that's something that we'll go into more later, but that's why I think this movie is my favorite of the series so far, is because it taps into that blend and it feels so personal and close.
Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head because I mean, you kind of have a compelling ASL storyline going on. There's a movie that I watched recently, well, it was a while ago with my wife, called Coda, and it was the child
Mhm.
of deaf adults, and it was a fantastic movie. Um, but again, like if you take away the creatures, like that's kind of all like you kind of have something similar there, but like that
Mhm.
movie was a comedy. So like all it had was comedy. So like if this movie wasn't a comedy, you're right. Like if you take out that element, it's like there's not really much left because it's not a comedy. It's
Mhm.
supposed to be a suspenseful thriller. So I think that was what kind of lends itself to but again, it's a very interesting way to tell the story. I'll probably mention it on the second episode.
Mhm.
But like I was watching, so like, again, I watched mostly just movies throughout the day while I'm working.
Mhm.
And I was watching this movie, and then like when it was lunchtime, usually I watch something with my wife. So she comes out, and we just switch to Modern Family. And then
Mhm.
when she went back to work, I went back to this movie, and it was a very interesting contrast to have like Phil Dunphy and Luke and Haley in between like this
Mhm.
world where the monsters hunt you, and I'm like,
Uh,
man, Haley would not last a second in the
they
Quiet
would
Place
they
world.
would have died
Yes,
immediately.
the Dunphys would have been a sad, yeah,
Oh,
that.
that's fun. Who of the Modern Family cast would survive A Quiet Place the longest?
Oh man, that is an interesting. I feel
I
like
mean, I feel like
no,
Alex,
yeah, I
Alex,
feel like
she
Alex
would
is smart enough.
understand. She would understand the premise really
Mm.
quick.
I'm like, Lily, it depends on like how old
Lily
Lily is.
could.
Because we're
I
in, this is going to be really sad to hear, but we're in season 6 already.
oh, okay. If
And we
by
started
the end
this
of the
late.
series, that Lily probably could.
Probably. Okay. Probably by the end.
I
Okay.
think honestly, I think a lot of the kids could. Like I think Manny probably could.
Well, I was thinking Manny, but then I was like, I feel like as soon as he sees a pretty girl, it's gonna be all over. I'm just saying, like, you think he's gonna be able to be like quiet between like he's just
That's
gonna have to
true.
talk to her.
If he saw a dead woman, he would start singing a song,
Hmm.
a mournful song.
Um, yeah, Luke, no, I'm sorry. I think it would just be Alex and Lily because I don't even see Cam or any of the adults.
I think
Gloria
Claire.
definitely not.
I think Claire could. I think Claire could survive. I don't think
Claire,
Phil could.
maybe if Claire like wasn't around Phil or Haley, then yes. But I would say Phil or Haley, if she was around them, she wouldn't be able to just be silent while they were. You know what I mean? Like she would yell at them like, "Be quiet," and then all three of them would get eaten.
I think I think Claire and Alex together could
Survive the
really
longest. Yeah.
survive really
If
well.
I needed a dream team from Modern Family to survive the Quiet Place universe, I'm
Mhm.
putting Lily towards the end and then Claire and Alex. And I think we got a winner there.
Oh, that's so fun. I love that so much.
Maybe that'll become a thing. Oh, that's so funny. We should ask if you have if you made it this far, if you have
Yeah,
anybody,
tell
if
us
you've also seen Modern Family and Quiet
tell us your
Place,
modern family
yeah,
survival ranking
tell us
for
your
a Quiet
choice
Place world.
and we'll talk about it next week when we talk about Quiet Place Part 2. So anyway, um, yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for day one. I can't wait to see it. I think it'll be really interesting, and I think I like the way that they made this one take place because we kind of got like a again, I'm kind of talking about the second one, but we got like a sliver of day one in the second movie,
Mhm.
and so seeing it occur in a different area with different people, I feel like will be a lot more interesting too. I think it
Mhm.
was a good idea to not center it on this family because I think they're going to do a part three, but I think not
Mhm.
centering it on this family for this one was a good choice, and a good way to make remind you that this happened to the entire world. And so, and like it's very like in some movies, it's very hard to start really small and then kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's just kind of what happens with franchises. And a lot of times people don't like it when films do that. And again, this franchise is still very green. Like this is the third movie in the franchise. So I still have to go see Quiet Place Day One to give my official review of it.
Yeah.
But to me, this universe is growing in the right way. It doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel unnatural. Like they're introducing new characters at a rate that seems appropriate and it is getting bigger. Like, it started with just a small family, but it's probably going to get bigger until the third one may encompass elements from the whole world. I don't know for sure. It depends on, again, I got to see day one, but it feels like it's doing it right. That feels like
Mhm.
it's doing it right. Even though Krasinski's not directing this one, I still have really high hopes for it, and I can't wait to
Mhm.
see it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same here.
yeah. So let us know your thoughts about A Quiet Place. Did you like it? It won a lot of awards for best sound editing too. I was surprised it didn't win any Oscars. I was trying to see if it won any Academy Awards, but I don't think it did.
Oh yeah.
Um, I think it got, I mean, unless I missed some, like, if it did win some, like, let me know down in the
Let
comments
us
in
know.
case I
Yeah.
missed it. But yeah, let us know your thoughts on the movie. Are you excited for day one? Have you seen day one? If you've seen it, don't spoil it because I'm not going to get to see it
Don't
until like a couple weeks. So just
do
calm
not
down.
tell us what happens in day one.
Do not. All right. I
Don't
know it's
wait
already
for
grossed
us.
100 million. A lot of you have already seen it. All right. Give me some time. I still haven't seen Bad Boys Ride or Die, so I got some catching up to do. So just don't spoil it. Don't be that guy.
Just
No
stop.
one likes that guy.
Mm-mm.
Stop it. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And yeah, next week we'll be covering part two.
Until then.